Today, we do a full breakdown and profile on newly acquired defenseman Ilya Lyubushkin. What does he bring to the Dallas Stars? And is this Miro Heiskanen's new sidekick?
You're Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm Joey Erickson, former producer of 105 Through the Fan. Please be sure to subscribe. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And as always, thank you so much for making us a part of your day and making us your first listen. Ilya Lyubushkin, that's today's subject on Locked On Stars. One of three defensemen acquired by the Dallas Stars this summer in free agency. What are the expectations for Lyubushkin in Dallas this upcoming season? Plus, why I believe he could be the perfect partner for Miro Heiskanen. Can we finally get Miro on his strong side? That is a very real possibility. So we're going to do a breakdown, a little background on Lyubushkin for any of you that are not familiar with him and the type of game he's bringing to the Dallas Stars. So let's jump right into today's episode, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sport stops sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So if you ask me which defenseman out of the three the Stars acquired in free agency would have the biggest impact for this upcoming season, I would give the edge to Ilya Lyubushkin for a few reasons, but I think the biggest reason why is Lyubushkin understands the type of player he is and the role he serves. So I believe we're going to get more consistency on Lyubushkin and his play from a night in, night out basis than a player like Matt Dumba or Smith. Even taking it back to the conversation with Seth of Locked On Stars I had last week. And he talked about Matt Dumba and the injury he suffered, which kind of forced him to play a different style of hockey than he was familiar with. And maybe he's still trying to find himself in this sort of new era of his career. So I am pretty bullish on Lyubushkin and what he can bring to the Dallas Stars. And this is outside of the contract stuff and the money, because of course, the number he came in at $3.25 million feels a bit steep for 3 years, but the Stars needed to add some bodies, and he is someone that brings physicality and I think can be a real nice piece for the Stars on the back end. So a little background on Lyubushkin. He's 30 years of age. He's from Moscow, Russia, 6'2", 200 pounds. He doesn't jump off the screen. For any of you that thought he's kind of a mammoth of a human being, he's no Yanni Hakanpää, by the way. He actually looks a little more like Niels Lundqvist, but he plays a lot bigger than his frame. You can look up Ilya Lyubushkin highlights, and most of the highlights you're going to get are big hits. He can lay the wood. He can deliver some big open ice hits. He is a defensive defenseman. Doesn't flash a ton of offensive skill, but he has a little of that in his game. So just want to lay out some of those expectations for you. He's not this giant human being. He's an inch taller than Niels, at least listed here on HockeyDB, and he's about 15 pounds or so heavier. So that's the type of frame you're dealing with. He is a right shot defenseman. Russians always have an interesting little pathway to the NHL. He played in the Russian Junior Hockey League, played in the KHL for a number of seasons, played over 150 games in the KHL with Yaroslav Lokomotiv. And then he came over to North America in 2018-19, where he found a home with the Arizona Coyotes for 41 games, had 4 assists his rookie season with Arizona. Hasn't spent really any time in the AHL. He played 2 games in Tucson with the AHL affiliate of the Coyotes. But other than that, he's sort of established himself as an everyday player, maybe not everyday player, but a solid defenseman in the NHL. Played in Arizona for 4 years. He got traded at the deadline to Toronto in 21-22. He played 31 games there. And statistically, that was probably his best season as an NHL player. He was really, really effective. He had 6 points in 31 games, 25 penalty minutes, and a +4 plus minus, which is one of his better statistics throughout his career. You can take some of the plus minus with a grain of salt. Look, no one is going to be amazing in Arizona with the teams they were trotting out there on an every night basis. We can be pretty honest about that. But he played in Buffalo in 22-23. Buffalo, I think, is sort of a model of how the Stars are going to use Lyubushkin this year. Buffalo was dealing with a plethora of left shot defensemen. One of those is Rasmus Dahlin. Another is Owen Power. 2 young, really, really promising defensemen who are going to be great players in the NHL for the next decade. And Lyubushkin was kind of brought in there to be that right shot. He played on the third pairing. He played in 68 games with Buffalo, had his best season statistically in terms of points. He had 14 points, 2 goals, and 12 assists. Had a pretty nice year in Buffalo. Then he was traded to Anaheim this past season. He played in 55 games with the Ducks before being traded at the deadline to Toronto once again. And he had a really strong playoffs for Toronto, 4 points in 19 games in the regular season, ended up with 3 assists in that 7-game series against Boston this past season, where he played the majority with Morgan Reilly, who, of course, is considered a top 10 defenseman, one of the best two-way guys in the league. And I think you can draw some comparisons to Miro Heiskanen. Many of you would agree with me that Miro is a better player than Morgan Reilly. So can Lyubushkin find a bit of a home with Miro this upcoming season? So Lyubushkin is a really, really interesting fit, and he's 30 years of age, so he's been around the block. He does not jump off the page statistically. He does not jump off the page in terms of his point totals or his offensive skill, but he's a defensive defenseman. He knows his game, and I think he understands his role. Is it going to be perfect here in Dallas? I don't know about that quite yet, because he's going to more than likely fill in as a top 4 defenseman for the Stars. But as we saw this past season, at least in Toronto, he kind of thrived in that role with Morgan Reilly. When he was in Anaheim, he was slotted on that third pairing with Pavel Mintyukov. And I'll get into some of the numbers with him and Mintyukov because they are pretty alarming, and why I think Lyubushkin almost has to play with Miro Heiskanen. I think he has to, based off some of the numbers you can find from his time in Buffalo, from his time in Anaheim, and of course in Toronto. So I think he's going to be a real intriguing fit. Of course, the Stars have signed him to a 3-year contract at $3.25 million. So I'm sure many of you have problems with that number, as do I, but we're talking about how can Lyubushkin improve the Dallas Stars on the back end. So I'm pretty high. I guess maybe not extremely high, but I give him a slight edge to another player like Matt Dumba. And when you watch his game, he is pretty mobile. He moves pretty well. Not the most gifted passer in the world, but he's got pretty good speed and he plays physical. And that is one thing I can get behind. I wanted Dallas to get a little bit more snarl, a bit more grit into their game. And yeah, he can lay out some people. He has some huge hits. As I mentioned, you type in Ilya Lyubushkin highlights on YouTube, you're not going to get a ton of flashy goals. It is him hammering some guys. And he has taken some guys to the cleaners in the past. So I think as a Stars fan, he is someone I believe will probably have the biggest impact on the back end out of the other free agents. So I'm really, really intrigued to see what type of player he can become here in Dallas. But I will caution that these other places he was at, you look at Arizona, he was getting paid $1.35 million. Buffalo, $2.75. Toronto, he was getting paid $700,000 just by Toronto. He was getting paid more by Anaheim, but Toronto was only paying him $700,000. So in the context of his game, that was really good. He was a really good player for what they were paying him. So we have to sort of elevate his expectations here in Dallas with his price tag. As much as I don't love doing that, because money is money and the cap is the cap. But if this forces Dallas to not be able to make moves down the line in order to improve the roster at the trade deadline, you name it, then does this signing really make a whole lot of sense? I think you have to take that all into consideration, the context revolving around Lyubushkin at $3.25 million. Is he going to be that type of player for you? And I feel like next season we're going to be looking back here in a few months and we'll be like, man, 3.25 Lyubushkin, not too bad. Dumba 3.75, that was that was a bit of an overpay. And we may look back and think both of these are overpay. I think you could certainly make that argument. We'll give it 4 or 5 months, but there are expectations for what Lyubushkin can be, and I think you have to elevate those with the price tag he's coming at. He's not getting paid what Arizona was paying him to be. He's expected to sort of slot in as a top 4 guy and really, really make an impact and play some big minutes. And there could be some concerns there. So I want to share some of his numbers, the advanced numbers of Lyubushkin's time in Anaheim specifically and Toronto, and why I think this shows you why his pairing with Miro Heiskanen may be almost inevitable with the Dallas Stars. I'll share that in just a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. It takes 30 seconds to download the FanDuel app on your smartphone, Stars fans. It's free and available. It's on the App Store. It's on the Google Play Store. You can download it and you can have some fun this summer. The Olympics are in full swing. It has been so much fun watching Team USA dominate some events, some others not so much, but Team USA is off to a fantastic start. I believe they're still leading the medal count. Make some money this summer enjoying the baseball games that are currently going on. Major League Baseball in the dog days this summer. Those Rangers just got swept, unfortunately, but hopefully they can turn it around at the trade deadline. FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So there are a few numbers I really want to highlight when it comes to Ilya Lyubushkin. And let's start this with his last season in Anaheim. So he played over half the season with the Ducks, 55 games, and the majority of his time, really all of it, he was partner with Pavel Mintyukov. And Mintyukov is a really young, talented two-way defenseman who was playing on the third pairing with Lyubushkin in Anaheim this past season. And Mintyukov is someone you would consider the best type of partner for Lyubushkin. You pair him with a really two-way sort of defenseman, and you can get the most out of Lyubushkin. But you also have to take into account that Mintyukov was 20 years of age. It's not like he is trying to shelter Lyubushkin. He's sort of finding his way in the NHL as well. But some of the numbers are really, really drastic. So you look at Lyubushkin's Corsi for percentage with Mintyukov. He played over 530 minutes with him. His CF percentage, 44. Lyubushkin CF percentage without Mintyukov goes down 39.78. But this is where the real drastic change comes. Corsi for percentage without Lyubushkin. Mintyukov at 57.39. A huge spike. A huge spike in terms of puck possession and the amount of shots and offensive chances he's creating. Mintyukov and Lyubushkin were actually a pretty solid pairing when it came to offense. Their expected goals for were 20.29. That is the highest rating of any partner in his season last year. But when you looked at their expected goals against, it was 25.31. And that was the highest among his partners last season. So they did have some upside offensively, but they really struggled defensively at 5-on-5. These numbers all come at 5-on-5, by the way. He was on the ice for 22 goals with Mintyukov last season. But now you take a step back and you look at his numbers with Morgan Reilly, which was his partner for the majority of the second half of the season with Toronto. And this is where it gets even more interesting. So Lyubushkin and Reilly, the CF percentage was 51.34. So a very nice increase from his percentage with Mintyukov. You go to Lyubushkin CF percentage without Reilly, and that was 50. So it was a bit better in Toronto. The CF percentage without Lyubushkin, Morgan Reilly's was 55.61. So there is a bit of an increase, but not as high as an increase that Mintyukov had, because Morgan Reilly is a better player at this point. He's a lot more solid. He understands the game. He's established himself as one of the better defensemen in the NHL. They were on the ice together for 8 goals. They scored 7. Their expected goals for was 7.14, and their expected goals against was 5.94. That's pretty low out of the other partners that Lyubushkin had. So they were very solid defensively and in the offensive zone. And this is where I kind of make the case why he feels like he's going to be a very good partner for Miro Heiskanen. With Reilly, he really thrived and had his best advanced statistics of his career. And you could say a lot of that is due to Morgan Reilly, but look, that's what the Stars have asked out of Miro Heiskanen for the majority of his career. They've paired him with Ryan Suter over the past few seasons, and you could kind of shelter some of his weaknesses. And Miro may be tasked with sheltering some of Lyubushkin's weaknesses, although I don't believe they're as emphasized as a player like Matt Dumba even. So I really am intrigued to see what Pete DeBoer is going to do with these defensive pairings. But you look at some of these numbers and you roll through them and you think, wow, I mean, he was pretty impactful for Toronto along with Reilly this past season. Why can't he be that in Dallas with a player I think is better than Morgan Reilly in Miro Heiskanen? And you just look at some of the numbers, specifically the goals for and the expected goals against, like those are really solid. And I think if you can get that type of player in Lyubushkin with Miro, you're not necessarily going to have a ton of concerns about your top pairing next season. Is it the best by any means? And am I trying to convince you that Lyubushkin is literally the perfect partner for Miro Heiskanen out of everybody else in the NHL? No. But with what they have, I think he may be the best partner. And I'm also making this decision based off of you need to get Miro on his strong side. Harley is a better player, of course, and Miro and Harley are spectacular. But man, I think getting Miro on his strong side is going to open up so many more possibilities. And that was something Buffalo was sort of trying to do with Dahlin, who has gotten the Miro treatment for a lot of his career because he is so talented and he is so good. Well, he can play on his offside and he's still very, very successful. Yes, that is true for the top 5% of defensemen that can play on their off end. Like the rare, really, really talented players. But your, average Joes, your Dumbas and Lyubushkins of the world, they are not going to thrive playing on their offside. So if you can get Lyubushkin on his strong side, pair him with Miro, I think you have to be pretty bullish on that pairing for the Stars. And maybe this is Miro Heiskanen's new sidekick. Maybe this is the guy that really opens up his game, allows him to thrive, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe he still has to work a bit harder to disguise or shelter some of the weaknesses of Lyubushkin's game. But Lyubushkin is a guy that understands he's not going to light up the scoreboard. Maybe this allows Miro to be a bit more aggressive, join the rush a bit more, play a bit more offensive than he was with Harley, because Harley was the aggressor and Miro sort of played the stay-at-home sort of defenseman. Obviously has the talent to move up and join the rush, but maybe Lyubushkin being a really solid guy on the back end with Miro could help Miro start to be a bit more aggressive and sort of tap that potential as an offensive defenseman. So yeah, I'm pretty interested and intrigued on how these two will work together. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the matter. And I know I'm throwing a ton of numbers at you, and some of you maybe I just want to see it. I want to give it the eye test. But I do want to just lay that out for you so you get a bit of a background and context, really, of what Lyubushkin could be. And, I've been pretty harsh and critical of the moves the Stars have made this offseason. And I want to be a bit more positive here. I want to emphasize some of the good things that are coming with these players and how they can fit in to the Dallas Stars this upcoming season. All right, let's just jump into some of the expectations. What are we going to get out of Lyubushkin here in Dallas, and where does he fit in and the type of roles he's going to play? We'll do that in just a moment. So if it's one thing that I think Stars fans should keep an eye on for this upcoming season in terms of Lyubushkin is his time on ice numbers. Because if he's going to be paired with Miro, who plays over 24 minutes a night, I know they tried to bump that number down a bit last season. They want to take some of the load off of Miro, but he plays anywhere 24, 25 minutes a night. Lyubushkin has never cracked over 20 minutes per game in the NHL. The most he played was in 21-22 with Arizona. In 46 games, he averaged a time on ice of just over 18 minutes. The last 3 years, he's hovered right around 17 minutes per game with Anaheim and with Toronto. That's sort of where he lives. So that is one of my concerns when it comes to pairing him with Miro, because if you can't rely on Lyubushkin to give you maybe 20 minutes a night, that is going to be really tough on other players like Harley, other players like Dumba, and even Esa Lindell, who at this point of his career, Lindell's not a guy that really needs to be giving you 22 to 25 minutes a night. You would like his numbers to be somewhere in the 17 to 20 minute range. So how is the deployment going to work with a player like Lyubushkin and Dumba? Dumba's not somebody that's cracking over 20 minutes a game as well. So I think you have to take that into account with the pairings as well. Since Lyubushkin, he's averaged in his last 3 seasons in the NHL 17 minutes a night. So it's DeBoer going to have to get pretty creative with his pairings when it comes to the usage of Lyubushkin. And this is also where a lot of my worries sort of are rooted in from the summer and the off season, because man, you need somebody that can shoulder the load and be impactful for you for about 20 minutes a night. And if Lyubushkin and Dumba can't give you that, then you're putting even more of a load on players like Miro and Harley. And look, I think they can do it. It's not that they aren't capable, but you've seen the sort of conscious effort from Dallas to limit Miro's minutes. And at some point, are they going to want to limit Harley's minutes if he's playing a ton to keep them fresh for the postseason? They just got worn down last year. God, they played so much. And hopefully we have 6 defensemen that Pete DeBoer will trust and play, where you're not running that 5-man rotation again, and you're just completely destroying the legs of your 2 best defensemen. So that is something to keep in mind as well, and to watch with Lyubushkin and the amount of ice time he will get here in Dallas. But he's a player that, man, he delivers a ton of blows. he hammers guys. He led the Sabres in hits during his season there. He had 168 hits in 2021 with Toronto. He's physical. He blocks some shots as well. You're going to see him on the penalty kill. I think he'll give the Stars some much needed gas on the back end there as well. At 5-on-5, not going to flash a ton with the offensive upside, but he's okay defensively. I think if you pair him with Miro, he'll be just fine. And he sticks up for his teammates. Man, he can fisticuff sometimes. He throws some punches. He will bring a presence to the Stars, which I think is much needed. If it's one thing that Lyubushkin can bring to Dallas, and that is a bit of a physical edge. If it's one thing he's going to bring to the Stars this season, if he can bring some of that edge, some of that attitude, I think that's a good thing, and I think it bodes well for the Stars as the season moves along. It is a long grind of a journey, and we saw that last season. They need some juice in the postseason. Can you give it that little extra oomph? You have that extra gas. Can you go to the reservoir and find some extra? Because they didn't really have any of that, especially in the Western Conference Final. And I pointed that out at one point during the finals this year, where, I mean, right away, Florida is just going after McDavid and Draisaitl and Bouchard in their face, being a pest, just being physical with them. And the Stars had none of that against Edmonton. After the whistle, you name it, right? Just some of that moxie. And possibly that was due to just being exhausted after a really, really tough run. But you're going to need some of that next season. And I think Lyubushkin can bring some of that. So yeah, I feel pretty good about Lyubushkin, and I may be talking myself into what he can be here into Dallas, but look, I'll be pretty positive about him and what he can bring, and maybe we'll have to revise it a few months into the season. But is this Miro Heiskanen's new sidekick? I think it could be. And maybe this is a pairing that's sort of a match made in heaven. We saw Miro play really well with Roman Polak. So maybe Lyubushkin is his new Polak, and the Stars will be off and running next season on the back end. So many questions, man. So many questions on this defense. As Jerry Jones would put it, a lot of ambiguity was his word during training camp. this past weekend. So there's a lot of ambiguity with the Dallas Stars this upcoming season, which makes it a little fun. Alrighty, that'll wrap up today's episode of Locked On Stars. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Never miss an episode of Locked On Stars. Show some love to other Locked On Podcast Network shows. Locked On Rangers, Locked On Cowboys, and Locked On Mavs. Please share them a follow and tune into some of their episodes as well. Alrighty, that does it for a Monday here in on Locked On Stars. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow. So long, Stars fans.